This book is called Bravest of All by Kate Emery Pogue. In a fire station in a corner of the city lived two big hook and ladder trucks, an ambulance with a resuscitator, a machine that blew great puffs of foam onto fires to put them out, 8 strong young firemen, and Jonathan. Long ago, when he was young, Jonathan was the best firefighter in the city. He and engine number 1 put out the warehouse fire of 32 and the Wilson school fire of 35. At the great hotel fire of 39, Jonathan rescued 132 people and was given a gold star, saying, "Bravest of all." Engine number 1 was parked in back of the station now. It was an old fire engine. Its pump wheezed, its paint was chipped, and the tarnished brass bell squeaked when it swung back and forth. Sometimes the neighborhood children came to climb and play on engine number 1. Jonathan told them stories then about how the warehouse wall had fallen on the engine and how he had saved the children at Wilson School. "Haven't seen the fire yet old number 1 couldn't put out," he told them proudly. And sometimes, if they asked, he told the children the story of the gold star on his helmet that said, "Bravest of all." But the young firemen said Jonathan was too old, and they wouldn't let him work anymore, and they said engine number 1 was out of date. One night, a fire started downtown. It raced through an office building and chewed into the store beside it. The sky glowed fierce and red as the flames leaped high. Whoa, whoa. Through the streets of the city, 100 sirens sounded. "Stay here, old-timer," called the young fireman to Jonathan. "Watch the shop." And off raced the hook and ladders. Off raced the phone machine. Off raced the ambulance. Whoa! The sirens faded away. Jonathan sighed and wandered out behind the firehouse where engine number 1 was parked. Far up in the sky, a few stars twinkled down on them. The night was dark and very quiet. Suddenly, the alarm bell sounded again. Someone else was in trouble. Jonathan rushed into the station. The new trucks were gone. The ambulance was gone. The phone machine was gone. Jonathan hurried back out, pulling on his fireman's coat. "We'll have to go, old partner," he called. "We're the only ones left." Engine number 1 coughed, brum, chug, chug, and started up. Clang, clang, squeak, clang, clang, squeak. The old bell rang. "Hurry, old engine, hurry, old engine." The wheels seemed to rumble as they started rolling through the dark streets. "Help somebody, help somebody," they squealed as engine number 1 rounded the corner. "Here we come, squeak! Here we come, squeak!" called the bell. There was smoke rising from a house just ahead. A frightened family stood on the curb. "The fire's in the basement," shouted the father. "It's spreading through the house," sobbed the mother. "Engine number 1 and Mr. Jonathan," cheered their little boy. "There's never been a fire they couldn't put out." Engine number 1 started to pump. It groaned and wheezed and creaked. Then a stream of water shot out through the hose. "Keep it coming, partner," called Jonathan, and he disappeared into the basement. Inside, the fire roared and crackled and leaped at him. It spat hot soot in his face. "Never seen the fire yet old number 1 couldn't put out," Jonathan told the blazing room, "and you're not going to be the first." He turned the hose on the flames, and they curled back. 100 red, snaky tongues licked at everything around him. They jumped at him from under the wash tubs, from behind the furnace, from the stairs. Jonathan could hardly see. He could hardly breathe the hot air. He was getting so tired that his legs didn't want to move. Still, he tightened his grip on the hose and kept forcing the fire back. Outside, a small crowd watched and waited. They were afraid Jonathan couldn't do it. The more the old truck pumped, the more it squeaked and wheezed. It couldn't go on much longer. Suddenly, engine number 1 shuddered and sighed and stopped. Everything was still. Nobody moved. The smoke drifted away. The fire was out. Wearily but happily, Jonathan drove engine number 1 back to the station. It really wasn't a big fire, he said as he climbed down and took off his coat. But, he added, it might have been. Not a big fire, he said, pulling off his boots. But if we hadn't gone, it might have been. The next morning, the big new trucks cruised home. They had put out the biggest fire the city had ever seen. They rolled proudly into the station, and the tired young firemen hopped down. "Taking it easy, eh, old-timer?" they asked Jonathan. "Did you watch the shop?" They laughed. "Yes," said Jonathan. "Yes, we did." Just then, a small voice piped up. "Where's Mr. Jonathan?" asked a little boy. All the firemen watched him as he walked to Jonathan. "You dropped this at our house last night when you were putting out the fire. My mother said you'd want it." In Jonathan's wrinkled brown hand, he placed a star. The young firemen gathered around to look. "What does it say?" asked the youngest and strongest, with new respect in his voice. They looked down at the star in the old-timer's hand. Blackened with soot and tarnished from the heat, the gold still glimmered through. "Bravest of all," it said.
Well, that's a random book.